Hello and welcome to Grody UnPrOfesSiOnAL. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. Today, I sit down with Matt Morgan, and we discuss everything from growing a business in inflationary environments to the forgotten art of jousting with a Honda Civic. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Great to be here.
I'm going to jump right into it. There is a story that all three people that listen to this podcast deserve to hear. One of you joining Precision Planting. You and I have worked at Precision Planting for about 10 years together, and there was a season where I was recruiting you. We were working on a certain project, and you had some technical expertise in that environment. We brought you into the facility, and the facility was a farm shop out in the middle of nowhere, and you came for the interview. After the interview, I think you and I talked a little bit, and then you were going to leave. The last I saw you before I headed into a meeting was you getting in your car to leave the interview, and I'll let you pick up the story from there.
Great. Let me just start with, this should be a book about how to get paid before you ever work for a company. So here I come to this kind of remote, rural barn transformed into an R&D office, and meet these guys, have some great conversation, and it's time to go home. So jump in my wonderful 2000 Honda Civic, start tooling down this dirt road. Imagine it's an open field, but this little dirt access road has this metal pole security gate.
So it's a not very security gate.
Yeah. I mean, really, if you were like most of the guys with a big F-150, the security gate poses no threat whatsoever. In your Honda Civic, however, this is a pretty significant obstacle. So I'm just kind of following the lead here. The company I worked for at the time had a security gate, and it was one of these gates where you pull up, and if you're the second one in line, as soon as it senses the car, it reopens.
Okay.
So I had that in the back of my head. But anyway, I'm behind this F-150, excited about the interview, these new guys, new opportunity. Mine's going a million directions, right? So gate opens up, truck goes through, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to slow roll on behind said truck, and this thing's going to sense my car, and all of a sudden it's going to start to reopen. No problem.
Right.
Well, I get about 3/4 of the way in and realize this pole isn't turning around. This pole is still coming at me.
So it's closing. The security gate is closing because the first car went through.
Yes, the security gate is closing, and the span of this pole, I mean, it's just one big pole, is coming, and before I can like react and throw it in reverse and get out of the way, it just kapoosh right through the front windshield. I'm sitting there in just complete shock, right? Because the pole is like now wedged in my car, and actually I don't even think it stopped. Like I think it tore in and swept through the windshield and went home. And so now I'm sitting there, and you're thinking to yourself, I can't believe this just happened. This really did not just happen. I got to turn around and go back.
It's a great first impression.
Yeah, here I am. I've only met, I think, 4, maybe 5 guys in this barn. I find Ben Schliff. I'm like, hey, this is going to be really awkward, but my car just got run through with the security gate out there. I wish I could have had a picture of the look on his face. It was like, seriously? And yes, seriously. So we grab another guy, Brad Stoller, and start to like assess this car.
The A-pillar was smoked. The windshield is smoked. This thing was tore up.
Yeah, that whole front face. And so I'm like, what do you guys think? Can we just put some duct tape on it? Is there some way I can limp this thing home? Well, we didn't quite realize the A-pillar, like that piece was still a little bit in the shock of the moment, hidden. So they were like, just call a windshield company tomorrow or something, and we'll get this sorted out.
So you went down in history as the first person to receive an insurance check before you received a paycheck.
That's exactly right. That is the key to getting paid before you ever show up for work.
That's right. Just get your car racked up on the way out. Surprisingly, they still decided to bring you in, and it was an awesome time getting to work together and develop product together. So the main goal of these conversations is always to talk about leadership. It could be product leadership, could be people leadership, could be organizational leadership. How would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I think hands-on.
Okay.
I think as long as I can remember, whenever I'm in a situation of leadership, whether it's been in athletics as a college athlete or in the corporate environment, I want to get right in the middle of it and really lead from within, not lead from without or disconnected from what's truly happening. And so usually for me, it's like, let's touch, taste, and feel what's really going on. Let's understand the people that are part of this, what their perspectives are, and then start to really identify what are these core problems and obstacles, and how can I be an agent to remove those barriers, remove those obstacles, and then to take that inherent potential that's in each and every one of the people in that organization and help put it in an environment to grow and thrive.
You mentioned as far back as college. What drew you to that leadership style?
I think I've always just gravitated more to what I can see and touch. And so people that lead by example, that maybe didn't even tell me what they were doing, but I could just see and observe. People are following them. People are encouraged. They're motivated. They're strengthened through how these people engage. And I think that was very much formative for me in how I started to think about leadership.
I've heard your leadership style. I've heard it described as a submarine captain. So a submarine captain, obviously, you're with the crew and you're the first one up. You're the last one to bed. You can do anything on the submarine. You can fill in for anyone. You eat last. It's an all-in leadership style. As I think about my experiences, as I've worked with you and seen your experience, there's a lot of pros. There's a lot of benefits to that leadership style. The organization knows that there's nothing you would not do. The organization has seen you push beyond even what they thought possible for themselves. They know that you are a source of energy, that when times are tough and things are down, you can be the optimist to push and the believer in the team and the believer in the organization. What are some of the cons that you've experienced? Because every leadership style comes with a set of pros and a set of cons. What are some of the cons that you've experienced in that leadership style?
Yeah, I think oftentimes there is not a direct correlation between your effort and outcomes, or perhaps the outcomes that you would want.
Okay.
And so take, for example, I remember a time when we were developing a new product with precision, and I'm out on the road and I flew into Fargo, I think at like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and literally drove to farms until 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
But the last farm, these guys were already in a bad spot. They were already pretty upset. It really wasn't anything to do with us. And they just unloaded on me at like 11 o'clock at night, right? And so the ugly underbelly is like, you're pouring yourself out. You're going through tremendous effort. You're like, I showed up at 11 p.m. to help you with some of these things. And you get met with resistance, with hostility. I think oftentimes that effort can get met with outcomes that don't quite square.
Yeah.
The other thing is you can pour into people.
Yeah.
And they will misunderstand you, leave, do things that you're like, why? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you talk to me?
Right.
And again, it's that whole effort doesn't line up with kind of the outcomes. I mean, the classic example is the bathroom scale, right? Like for me, physical fitness, part of trying to balance that crazy approach to leadership is physical fitness. It just kind of helps reground me. So I'm kind of known as a guy that goes out, could be in the middle of an Argentine countryside at 4 in the morning and runs.
Goes for a run.
And that's like cathartic for me. I get recentered, refocused, and ready to go. And yet for me, if I'm putting in the miles on the road and I'm seeing the bathroom scale stuck or moving the wrong direction, it's just like, oh.
Is it all worth it?
Yeah.
Right. What you're highlighting there is one of the motivations behind the style of this submarine captain, this hands-on style, is that you can oftentimes see a direct correlation between effort and result. There's times that you can go to bed after an exhausting 24-hour sprint into a project, and you can actually go to bed physically exhausted, but kind of fulfilled by all that was done in that effort. What you're highlighting there is there are actually a lot of days you go to bed and you look back and it's like, man, a lot of those hours were wasted, or a lot of those hours were in the wrong direction. And there can be a creeping in of a futility if you correlate too close the outcome to my motivation. Is that one way to say it?
Yeah, because I think there are other leadership styles, or let's say other organization types, where you can solve that by distance. So
Sure.
the more removed I am from really seeing the true outcomes, I'm going to feel less of a correlation between the effort and the outcome.
Right.
It's not going to hit me as hard.
Right.
But if I'm there, if I'm close to the customer, if I'm in that submarine,
Yeah.
and I feel every shockwave in the submarine,
Right.
now there's a higher sensitivity, a higher attunement to my effort outcome relationship.
That's a really interesting thing you open up there. As a leader, I think it's worth knowing the style that you prefer, the style that you're natural at, the style that you want to be good at, and understanding the benefits to it, the environments it works really, really well in, and the environments that maybe for yourself or for the organization, it's not going to work well, and seeking to match the style with the environment, with the situation. One of the things that I came across in my wrestling through this, as the organization grew, I just felt this burden to be everywhere. And a friend of mine gave me some advice, and he said, hey, you've been in this organization for years. People know that you want to be there. People know that you would be there if you could be there. You're not thought of the same at all as that leader that sits in the ivory tower and has always sat in the ivory tower. The organization credits you for being there even when you're not, because they know you would be there if you could. And that, it doesn't remove the stress of not being there in its entirety. But as I started to internalize that, it was like, okay, it wasn't that I was frustrated that I wasn't there because I couldn't direct it. That's different. I'm not talking about having to be there because it has to be done my way. It was the stress of not being there because of feeling like you were letting the team down by not being there.
Yeah, that's so good. I love the way you put that. And really what I hear you highlighting, and it's so true for me, it's a battle with your own voice.
Yeah.
It's the battle with the voices in your own mind that say, like, I just need to be there with these guys. I want to be in the thick of it so that when things go down, they know I'm there. They know they can trust me to be the first one to take the bullet, or to be the first one when we need to charge a hill.
To step in the breach.
That voice is one that we have to manage. And you did a great job of illustrating how you look outside that voice. Now, if I show up day one and I never demonstrate that I'm going to be there,
correct,
that's one thing.
Yep.
But guys like us, we don't typically start there. We're going to run hard for a period of time, clearly have established that. And then I think the wisdom is, how do you start recalculating when and how to be there?
Yeah. You just touched on something which is exactly where I wanted to head. You just recently changed environments. You went from working in one company that you'd been for 10 years to working for another company that you've been there for 100 days. How have you wrestled through the transference of that leadership style? You had 10 years of experience and credibility and all these things. For a leader that is that trench leader, that is that breach leader, that submarine leader, what does it look like as you enter a new organization that says, hey, you're just a guy that applied for a job?
I think the comment of race to fail is huge, because you start out with zero knowledge. I mean, I went from a totally different industry, totally different approach, totally different business, and you start at ground zero. So after 10 years, you kind of have a comfort level where you can roll out of bed based on knowledge, experience. Now you're in a whole new environment. You barely know where the bathroom is, let alone where do I go to get parts? Who do I talk to fix this thing?
Yep.
The only way in my kind of grid to start is to just dive in start racing at the different problems and situations to learn.
To rebuild that credibility, to rebuild that knowledge base.
Yeah. One of the huge shifts in this recent example is going from kind of more of an R&D engineering environment to a factory.
Yeah.
a funny story along those lines. I think for the first month, a lot of the workers just thought I was some like weird new production employee. We would be working in some of this equipment, doing some cleaning and whatnot. And the guys would be like, hey, it's break time. I'm like, awesome. Go take a break. I'm going to be here plugging away. And they're like, you trying to milk the clock? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, I'm on a mission here, man. Like, we're going to get this done. So they kind of joke now and they say like, hey, we understand you don't need to sleep, eat, anything. We do. So we're going to go take a break.
Right. You introduce a new aspect, a new layer to the style, which is you don't pull rank. You like to operate without the insignia per se, right? You did not show up at the new organization and say, hi, my name is Matt Morgan. I am the director of this. I'm the manager of that. I'm the guy, I'm the hot shot they hired to fix this place. You showed up and jumped into the problem with the people, helping the people, trying to understand what they're trying to get done, rather than showing up kind of and saying, hey, everybody, I'm the guy, follow me. It's much more of trying to establish that they want to follow you because they're bought into who you are. They're bought into your ideas. They're bought into your energy. Is that the right way to think about it?
It's really interesting. In this case, throughout the course of the interviews, they're like, we just need somebody that can do fill in the blank.
Right.
We need somebody that can help with maintenance. We need somebody that can help kind of bring some tools and solutions to how we're doing things. We need somebody. And so I kind of joked and said, well, when I show up, can I have a smock? Because you have to kind of wear smocks. Can I have a smock that says somebody?
Somebody. I'm somebody.
I'm the somebody, right? And so I kind of took that to heart to say in my first 3 months, I want to be the somebody who's there when you need a tool, when you're really experiencing a painful process or step in the work. I want to be there to see it, experience it, and now let's talk about how to solve that.
Yeah.
And it's been incredible to watch kind of how trust flows through that process.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a tough one here. How do you hedge or how do you protect against exhaustion and burnout?
Poorly.
It's a hazard of the job.
It is.
Right?
It is a hazard of the job. For me, there's a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term approach. Recognizing in this game, I'm going to start out fast.
Yes.
I'm going to run some 7-minute miles, but I got to pull back and start clipping some 9-minute miles to just kind of regain my legs, regain my breathing. And I feel like I'm even in the middle of that type of transition. The first 2 months, I ran hard.
Right.
And now I'm starting to kind of dial back, recalibrate, and you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining that trust.
Yeah.
So there's more efficiency in how things work that just doesn't exist when you start from scratch.
Anybody listening to the podcast is either themselves or has experienced somebody in an organization that's just one of those thoroughbreds, just runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. I remember early in my career, there was one particular gentleman that pounded the hours in, sleeping a few hours a night for weeks and months on end. And I went to his supervisor and I said, man, this guy's going to run himself into the ground. The supervisor's response was, let him run. Let him run. And that always bothered me. It always bothered me that the leadership saw that it was happening and basically said, hey, it benefits the organization and in some way it may benefit me as a leader. And so I'm just going to let the person run themselves essentially into the ground. For me, as I've led people like myself, I've always felt the burden to have a good enough relationship, have a good enough connection with the individual to be able to say, you got to slow down. You got to take a break. Your family needs you to take a break. Your health needs you to take a break. Now, they don't always listen. In fact, they rarely listen. I think that vote of confidence from a leader to an individual that's driving and driving and driving, the vote of confidence which says in this kind of roundabout way, you don't need to do that. It's harmful to you. It may be helpful to the organization, but it's harmful to you. It conveys to the employee that they're more important in the long term, to use your marathon analogy. The completion of the marathon is more important than the split time on this given project.
Absolutely. And let me take that one other direction. And this is something I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, I've really started to make sure I state right at the get-go. Don't think that I expect you, other person, to in any way
That's very important.
act the way that I'm acting right now.
Right.
This is very much my default mechanism
Yeah.
for learning, for growing, for entering in.
Yeah.
Please feel zero pressure that I'm asking you to copy me.
Right. Because otherwise, especially as a leader and especially as a day one employee in an organization, I would think that the most likely conclusion is this guy's a hotshot. This guy's a ladder climber. This guy's a hiney kisser. This guy wants the spotlight. The general populace, seeing you come into an organization and just Tasmanian devil the place, is going to conclude nefarious intentions behind those actions. And that's going to affect your ability to actually lead.
Absolutely. And that's where I try to come in just very open, like, hey, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to sit and figure this out from a desk. So I am just going to run at this thing with all the energy that I have, learn together, learn from you, learn with you. And that's how I'm going to get to a place where I can really start to bring value to this organization.
Yeah.
And I find people respond to that. And I think what you touched on, you have to value the person first.
Yeah.
And recognize, unity doesn't mean uniformity. It isn't to say we need 100 Justins and 100 Matts. Mm-hmm. No, we actually need a complementary set. And so it's to say, like, number one, don't think I'm the blowhard out here trying to show everybody up. That's not the game. Two, I'm not expecting, and it would be harmful if we all acted in this same way.
Right.
And I hope, too, over time, you'll see I only act this way in certain situations and under certain constraints.
How have you modified your style over time? I think it was Shaquille O'Neal that said 40 ain't 30, bro.
So I think understanding where my limits are and not pushing to the ragged edge, giving a safety factor. I think that's part of it. Mm-hmm. I think also understanding the situation, understanding the need of the moment. I remember, and I'll use the running analogy again. Some years ago, I used to run so hard in the opening miles, and I would literally just tank the last mile to 2 miles of any road race I ran. Mm-hmm. And then I started this marathon training, and a friend was like, Matt, you cannot run a marathon this way. You have to intentionally set a pace for those opening miles that keeps your heart rate low, keeps it kind of normal. Then as you get in, let loose. Because he's like, you're going to feel like you can run at the best clip of your life in those first 6 to 8 miles. Don't do it. And I think that has helped. That was probably 8 years ago that I ran that marathon. And it just really helped solidify for me how to be cognizant of those energy levels.
Yeah.
Part of it too, and we're similar in this way. I'm a reader and a thinker. On the one hand, I'm going to default to action as a leadership style, but I need time to contemplate, to think, because I'm not just aimless beating the air. Most of that energy is very strategic, very channeled, and making space for that recharge. I think those are the things, though, understanding like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, what recharges you. And then physically too, how do you take care? Like diet, I've had to radically change the way that I eat, I would say over the last 8 years, to be able to maintain some level of
energy level.
When you're 20 years old, you don't think about diet. No. You don't think about
sleep,
exercise, sleep, any of or reading. I think I graduated from my mechanical engineering degree and thought, I'm never going to read another book in my life. And
I explicitly chose engineering as a degree because it did not have reading. I just had to know equations.
You want to know how I came to love reading? This is like a great, cheap engineer story. So, hire at Caterpillar right out of undergrad. I'm all by myself. I don't know anybody in Peoria. And it took like 2-3 weeks to even get cable TV set up. So all I had were these old VHS tapes. Some of our listeners may not even know what a VHS tape is. They existed, but so I had this VHS tape of Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
And there's this classic line that you can get a Harvard education in a public library. And that line just was like, you know what? That's a great challenge. And so for like the next 3 weeks, I started going to the library and getting all these classic books, Huck Finn, different things. And through that, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And never looked back.
Matt Damon has had a big impact on your career.
Yeah. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are like huge influencers in my reading movement.
Your leadership experience has spanned a lot of different domains. You've already mentioned that you came into your career in engineering. You're currently leading in an operations environment. At some level, if you zoom in tight enough, that's a pretty big span. But really, your career spans much broader gaps than the difference between engineering and manufacturing. One of the experiences that you have is actually going from an engineering organization to Argentina and leading an entire business unit, essentially sales, support, purchasing, engineering, the whole business unit. Tell a little bit of your story of the transition from engineer to Argentine business leader.
We were developing a product. It was a soil contacting product. So we needed environments year round that were favorable to do in-ground testing. Mm-hmm. And obviously in the United States, you can travel south, but the reality is it gets hard, it gets dry, it's just not realistic. Yeah. And the beauty of these South American friends is that their spring is our winter. So January, February, this is in midsummer. Mm. And I said, all right, I'm going to come down and I'm going to explore Argentina. Let's see what happens. I show up and I don't know anything. I don't know any Spanish. I remember I show up at the airport, get picked up by the coworker down there. We're visiting farms. It's incredible. The scale, the size of everything was remarkable. I'm not understanding much of anything, so they can be upset, frustrated. It's all water off a duck's back, right? At the middle of this trip, it's a 2-week trip, they drop me at the hotel. Like everyone's exhausted. We've been running hard all week. They're like, hey, we're going to drop you at the hotel, pick you back up on Monday. Great. I have no car, but I'm kind of an adventurous guy. So let's go out. I'm going to get some gifts for the family, check out. Maybe there's a church here I can visit, these kind of things. I'm sitting there in the hotel, get up Saturday morning, start exploring, quickly run into all of these cultural things. So for me, I'm like, oh, it's 2 p.m. This is the perfect time to go shopping for gifts. No, it's siesta time in South America. So store after store, close. At the same time, I hadn't eaten. The only thing I can find are what looks like a hot dog, but is clearly not a hot dog.
And you got to be careful when something looks like a hot dog and it's not a hot dog.
Exactly. So
sometimes you have to be careful even when it is a hot dog.
So again, in classic Matt Morgan fashion, instead of take that risk, I go to the pharmacy and I find some like nut grain bar thing that at least got me through the day. This trip was just incredible. So I find this church and I go to this church on Sunday morning expecting, really, I'm not going to understand what's going on. I'm just going to take in the experience, right? And little did I know, there's a person there that's a translator. She's conveying the message to me in English, invites me for this like English group that night. Next morning, coworker picks me up and he says, you're on Facebook. You're like all over town. You're like an international incident here over the weekend. And I'm like, well, this is just kind of how it goes, you know? So that was like the start for me of what I would say was a love affair with Argentina and the people of Argentina. Mm-hmm. And then we came back. And I think through that experience of being there, I recognized like there are some incredible people. We've got a talented team, but the business is deeply broken. Mm. And if we can't start to put some changes in place for the distribution channel, for even the infrastructure of the business, all this innovation, it's going nowhere. Mm. That was part of the catalyst through some conversations. Helped when some guys left that opened a door to kind of bring in new leadership. Mm-hmm. And so came down for kind of really what was intended right from the beginning to be a short-term stint. Knowing my oldest daughter was going to get to college age in about 2 years, that put a natural clock on the experiment, on the work. But at the same time, I think, Justin, for me, that really emphasized that the big mission was to raise up Argentinians to do this work, right, and to be able to thrive when I left. What was so helpful in that experience was recognizing success is not in 2 years. successes in 4 years, successes in 5 years when I'm long gone. And that was really a cool part of that experience.
You've talked about you're a hands-on leader. You've talked about you want to be in the fray. How did that transfer cross-culturally and across a language barrier as you move from Midwest U.S. to Rio Cuarto, Argentina?
In the absence of words to communicate, your actions will definitely speak not only louder, but also clearer than words. What I discovered through that, Justin, is they were teaching me in so many ways how community, how team could function in ways I had never seen before.
Elaborate on that.
Yeah, what does that mean? So on the farm here in the U.S., I don't know that I've hardly ever seen a guy stop for lunch. He may have a cooler in the cab.
Sure.
Family may run out with like the ambulance brigade and bring sandwiches and stuff to like grab and jump back in the tractor cab. But to like sit down, truly stop operations and enjoy an hour and a half to a 2-hour cookout, never experienced that. In Argentina, this was almost every day. What was so beautiful is the work itself was secondary to the relationship around the work. And they actually made space for that relationship to happen. And the mate is part of that, right? Because in the morning, they would take a break. I'm like, this is completely unheard of. What were they doing? They were sharing life around this mate tea. So you would take a drink of this tea and you're sharing one cup, right? So there's
one straw.
Yeah, there's one straw. I mean, for some of my U.S. partners, it's a little gross. I came to love it because you would sit and there's one guy who kind of controls the whole conversation. He hands the cup to one guy. Well, guess what? He can't talk. So then while he's occupied with the cup, other guys are talking, and it's this round robin talking about life, talking about the farm, talking about what's happening with the crops, like all of that mixed together. And it was just beautiful. Every day you're seeing these portraits and you're hearing truly the heart of what Argentine farmers care about.
So through an American lens, that smells hyper inefficient. Some would probably say lazy, to stop and take a break. Your experience was the predominant goal of this is not to avoid work. The predominant goal is to connect with other people.
Yeah. And for a personality like mine, that's default to action.
Right.
It was so instructive. It was difficult at first.
Right.
It felt so counterintuitive.
Right.
It's like, what are we doing? We're wasting time here, and especially with the language barrier. But over time, I really began to treasure those moments. I can remember there was one father-son farm. It was Carlos and Guido, these guys, amazing guys. And we were doing some development work. So we would visit these guys probably every other week. Well, anyway, he was an amazing cook. He would come in and just cook for hours. And we would sit around the table. His wife, his other kids would come. And we would just sit there and laugh and talk about the food and life. We came when they opened the new facility down in Argentina. This was like a year or so ago. Carlos and Guido are there, and just big hugs, tears in our eyes. I love those guys. And so those were just some of those kind of practical lessons that I think took that submarine personality and put a new dimension to it that says, you know what? Efficiency isn't always action.
Right.
Efficiency is investing in the people and building that trust, not just through action, but through life and the holistic person.
Yeah, that's good. When you think about people leadership, was there differences culturally in what is expected kind of in the supervisor-employee domain? What did individual people leadership look like in an Argentine context?
Yeah, and I think both in Argentina, but I would say generally in South America, it's a very different paradigm, especially from what we've been talking about is this hands-on, I don't wear the badge. Imagine a factory setting where if you're one of the top 5 guys in the factory, you get to park 10 feet from the door. Everybody else is walking a mile. That's the cultural norm. Power and prestige gets you better parking spots, gets you a better meal plan. Yeah, it's a very stark and obvious contrast. And
so you were breaking the structure in a lot of ways.
Yeah, a comment that came out regularly through those years from a leadership perspective, we have never had a leader talk and relate to us like this, because they're very distant, very non-personal, very business only, which is so countercultural to everything I just described about the culture, right?
Sure.
And so for someone to be open and say, oh, you need help with moving furniture. When can I show up? I'll help.
Right.
Or you're having this issue. Do what you need to do. We'll cover you. They were floored with that kind of personal engagement, care, and concern from leadership. Usually it's like, I need these reports. I need them by tomorrow morning. Do it or you're done. That's
a
the
much more
expectation.
authoritarian command and control leadership style is normative. And what you're saying is the people were responsive to your style as you came in. Yeah. You had the unlucky timing of your 2-year stint in Argentina overlapping with this little thing called COVID. For those of us in the U.S., we have our opinions about what should have happened and shouldn't have happened and did happen and was real and wasn't real. And we don't need to get into any of that stuff. But for the American listener, what was COVID like in Argentina?
Loco. Crazy. Obviously, the world around, things are turned upside down.
Right.
But I'll kind of tell the story of how it hit us, because even that is crazy in and of itself. We're at the biggest farm show of the year. It's usually a 4-day show. About day 2, some of the executives from U.S. start showing up. These executives show up and they're like, we're flipping our tickets. We're going back tomorrow morning. They're telling us something's going down. They're going to start shutting down the airport, all these things. And I'm going, this is crazy talk. Like, get back to the show. I think it was after day 3, sure enough, the gauntlet comes down and they say, you have 24 hours to pack up and get home. And for the next 4 months, my family could barely leave the house. I'm a morning runner. I'm out at 4 a.m. running in a gated neighborhood, and the guard says, you have to go back inside.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lockdown as in lock your front door.
Literally, you don't leave your property unless you need food or pharmacy, and you have to prove it. Because like here, okay, who's going to enforce that? In Argentina, they had built-in structures of enforcement.
Yeah.
So it's very typical on the roadways to have these checkpoints, they're called. And they're looking for lights, license plates, bad papers, all the kind of classic things, right? Well, imagine now in COVID, those things become great vehicles for policing what's happening. So to go to Walmart and get groceries, there actually was a Walmart. I bought more bacon than they'd ever seen consumed in their lives. But to go to Walmart, there are 4 police checkpoints, and you better have receipts, you better have bags, you better be able to prove you're not out just running around. You actually were.
And those checkpoints were there before COVID. Is that right?
They were in different locations, but you have this.
But the concept of a police checkpoint is not foreign to an Argentine driver.
Correct. They just quickly redeploy them into zones that are high traffic zones. And now you have a perfect enforcement vehicle to make sure people aren't just out and about. If you want to avoid the checkpoint, you go before 8 a.m. So they are not like a Matt Morgan who's going to show up at 5 a.m. to catch the eager beavers.
Right.
They're going to slow roll 8 a.m., 8:30. So I discovered Walmart opened at 7:30. It was supposed to be for seniors, but I used my bad Spanish to cop out, and they would just let me into Walmart.
They're like, he's just buying bacon. Nobody else is going to buy it,
like,
so let him in.
This bacon's been here for 2 years, and now suddenly we're getting...
Gringo's buying it. It's fine.
Yeah. Now, I had to be careful, because if I was there too long, there would be a checkpoint. But I had groceries, so it wasn't a big deal.
There's a story that I believe involves a checkpoint that has become infamous, which is you being Mac Borgen instead of Matt Morgan.
Yeah, so I have an alias in Argentina because our family was trying to come back. My oldest needed to take the battery of college entrance exams. She needed to finish up her driver's license. So it was a dogfight to get plane tickets and all this stuff because they're canceling flights every day out of Ezeiza in Argentina.
You actually, at one time, were going to possibly have to take a State Department flight.
We did take that State Department.
So you were on a U.S. government website saying that I'm a U.S. citizen in a foreign country and I cannot get home through commercial airlines. And so help me get home.
Yeah. They call them repatriation flights. And it's basically some airline I had never heard of, but they charter this plane at these set windows and you get your name on a log. And that's basically your ticket to Miami. And then you've got to work with whoever to get from Miami home. First step was you got to get a plane to even get home. But then we had about an 8-hour drive to get from our house to the airport because in-country flights are done. All internal domestic flights completely done. Even driving was not very favorable. So imagine too, we have 14 suitcases packed into the back of my truck. I mean, just heaped like the Beverly Hillbillies. And we're trying to get to the airport, but you can't get there in one whole day. So we needed to stop at one of the guys' little villages and stay the night to kind of break up the trip and go the rest of the way. So as we're coming in, there's a checkpoint and the guy stops us. And of course, they have what appeared to me to be full hazmat suit.
Right.
And so, sir, in Spanish, of course, sir, name and age. And so I said, I've got my mask because you had to wear a mask in the car with your family. Like that was part of the protocol. So, I'm not Morgan. He kind of looked. And of course, so there's one dude in the hazmat suit. Then there's his assistant, his little minion. She had the clipboard and she's the one physically writing down. He's struggling catching my name through the mask and all this and his hazmat suit. So he asked me to repeat it. So Matt Morgan. And he heard Mac Borgen. Mac Borgen. He goes to the gal with the clipboard, Mac Borgen. And she scribbles it down. And so I was like, there it is. I can do whatever I want in Argentina now.
Because you have an alias now.
And this truck is registered to a Mac Borgen.
It's a Mac Borgen. That's awesome. Continuing the conversation of just the breadth of leadership experiences that you've had. You've been in engineering. Now you're currently in an operations environment. You've gone to the international experience in Argentina through a global pandemic. Another arena that you've led in your career is in a church environment. You were a pastor for 5 years, 6 years. Talk to me about leading in a nonprofit, a church, a missional environment versus kind of a business environment.
The obvious one, right, is probably something we've either thought or some people have even expressed, which is the day you stop paying me is the day I stop showing up.
Correct.
And so when you're working in a volunteer organization, that mantra is even
ever
more
present.
Yeah, it's very true. And you better tend to it carefully. People's time is precious. The similarity is, what is it that motivates and inspires people? I think it's a clear mission and vision they believe in.
Yeah.
And then it's people that they trust and believe are committed to that mission.
Yeah. I've led in a couple environments, one at church as well, coached competitive youth sports. I've found leadership in those environments to be harder. And I think you're touching on it, which is the barrier to exit is a lot lower. If you're going to leave your job, you have to put in the work of finding another job or put in the work of deciding where you want to go. If you don't want to be part of the community environment, you can decide that tomorrow just to stop going. As a leader, to your point, you have to engage the group. The other part that I've experienced, the barrier to feedback is almost nothing. Maybe even inappropriately low in certain instances. And so as a leader, you end up in a very feedback-rich environment, which is a learning opportunity for young leaders, for leaders that are growing, but you have to filter. Just because you get 20 times as much feedback does not mean you're getting 20 times as much useful feedback. There's this art of looking for the truth inside of feedback that may not have been given in a constructive manner, may not be given in a helpful manner, but the volume of feedback that you get in a nonprofit environment, at least my experience, has been, it's categorically higher because, again, the barrier to exit is so low. They're like, I'm going to tell you who I think you are, and if you don't like it, I'm going to leave. Has that been your experience as well?
I think so. And The other thing that I think often happens is leadership in the volunteer organization settles for just the lowest common denominator. How do you pursue excellence? Because you don't have job descriptions, you don't have interview processes to figure out, do they have the interest, the ability to do some of the functions that are going to make that ministry thrive? And so you have to navigate that and kind of do it more relationally than formally. Something we haven't talked about, how do you challenge the status quo in an organization, right?
Yeah.
It looks one way in a business context, but in this volunteer thing, you might have some people that for 20 years have been doing this thing a certain way.
Yeah.
And yet that certain way doesn't allow other types of people to participate.
Sure.
And so as a leader, you're trying to kind of shift and change. You want to keep that wisdom, but reform it so that it invites more people to participate. And I found that to be one of the really challenging aspects of that volunteer organization.
You said you're a guy that connects one-on-one. You're a hands-on guy. Do you think your style transfers well between the two types?
I think it does. And yet, the older I get, there's still more to learn. In a recent case, I was put into a part of the organization that had a very different background. And maybe in some ways, like a mole, I was stuck into that organization trying to help them change in ways that maybe they didn't even realize needed to change. Through that experience, I just realized if I stress the change more than the patience of the relational side, it can cause fracture and fissure that actually works counter to the whole mission.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in volunteer organizations. And I think that's part of wisdom and having good friends and peers that are not connected to that to help you play the long game.
Yeah.
Because I think when you default to action, you're so focused on the short term.
Yeah.
You can sometimes lose sight of that longer term. And I feel like that's been another area I've really had to learn and grow in recent years, is to be patient, to just sit and be willing to chip and not just drive with all your energy.
So another layer based on what we've been talking about here is that it's possible that in the nonprofit environment and the pastoral environment, that Argentine approach of, hey, the relationship is more important than the outcome, or the outcome can't be done absent of the relationship. It's not that it's zero important in leading in a for-profit environment in the United States, but it's probably higher on the list of importance as you think about a nonprofit environment.
And I would say, Justin, it's discerning when to lead with relationship, like when to drive at relationship hard versus drive at action hard.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes I get confused, and the more stressed I am, the more out of my comfort zone I am, the more I want to default to act and not relationship. And I think part of what this broad range of experience has been teaching me is be attentive. If it's knowledge, if it's like knowing how to do something, default to action. If you're going to challenge the status quo, or if you're trying to change a culture, pay very careful attention to the relationship. Be slow to act.
Yeah.
That's been a hard thing, but a good thing I've been trying to learn and adapt over time.
Yeah, that's well said. As we wrap here, what are other aspects that you are wrestling with and learning about yourself and about leadership?
Something that hits me more the older I get is I've done a lot of different things. And I don't say that as a boast. I just say I have changed not just companies, but complete vocations 4 times in some pretty dramatic ways. And I think what I would say with that is when you enter into a new context, the need for humility is so high. And what does that look like? How do you flesh that out? I think for me, this is something, again, I've just been learning, I would say in spades the last 3 years in particular. When I enter into a new context, whether it's relational or knowledge base, my tendency is to project great confidence and to show energy and drive that can easily be misinterpreted or can really be a barrier to humbly saying, like, I don't know what's happening here.
Right.
And so instead of acknowledging that, maybe being more humble or admit failure, I drive toward more action, more effort to solve it. I'm just realizing like, no, there's a time and a place for that effort, but be willing to say like, you know what, I really don't know anything about this industry. I really don't know anything about this type of technology. I'd love to learn. Share with me what you know. Where can I go? But I think to have that genuine humility to recognize, as a leader, I want to put on a front. And it's not like malicious. I think it's just a natural way of trying to say, we're going to get this. Like, we're going to be positive in the face of opposition.
Yep.
But I think when it's met with maybe exhaustion, met with stress, met with just the deep
anxiety of being new.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know so much.
If I piece together your approach, it's really aiming for a high energy humility.
Yeah.
At a certain level, it's to be in the fray. It's to be in the trench in a manner that connects relationally with the person and shows them that you are there to help, not to embarrass, not to replace, not to outwit, not to take the glory, but to really serve in a high energy way. A high energy humility is really the style that you're aiming for. My experience has been that more often than not, high energy is attributed to pridefulness or to arrogance or to self-seeking, glory-getting. And so you have to go out of your way to not just say the words of humility, but actually demonstrate the actions of humility in that high energy, aiming to learn quickly environment.
And I know it's cliche, but I think admitting where that energy, even for yourself, crossed a line. And I can just think of one clear example. It was that same development project. There was another engineer on that team. And one afternoon, we're sitting there with our boss kind of talking through some stuff, and he just blows up, like really upset, really frustrated. And I was like, whoa, like I thought we were cool. I thought things were going well. So the next morning, like I texted him, I said, hey, can we just talk? I want to figure this out. And it was a great example, Justin, where he was like, hey, you're just plowing 100 miles an hour. I wanted to kind of be more engaged in the process here and some of the thought processes. And you're just going so fast, running with such effort. You kind of left me in the dust. And so to like sit there and say, you know what? That is selfish. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Like I should have been more aware. I got so focused on results and just driving towards solutions that I left that relational piece out, and it's wrong. I tell you, that just totally changed our dynamic. Yeah. But was so instructive to me of like, how often am I doing that? It's not out of intent, but it's when you get focused and default to that effort, that high energy approach, things like that are going to happen. But how you deal with those things makes all the difference in the world.
That's great. Matt, I can't thank you enough for your time to come by and sit down and share the wide range of experience that you have on leading people, leading organizations, and not just setting up a trophy case of all the things you've done, but really talking through the self-assessment, the self-evaluation. One of the hardest things to do is to see candidly what's in the mirror. What I really appreciate about you is the desire to, in so much as you can, look in the mirror and see what's really there and work on it and seek to improve it. Can't thank you enough for the time to come by and share your experience.
Thanks, Justin. No, it's been great to be here and looking forward to hearing more of your episodes.
Awesome. Talk to you later.
See ya.
For those of you seeking more tips and tricks in the submarine captain style of leadership, I can be reached via my email, justin@grody.io. If you happen to be a member of the Argentinian Highway Patrol in search of the American who repeatedly evaded the COVID checkpoints, you are looking for Mac Borgen. You will find him in the bacon aisle of your local Walmart. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.